The diplomatic transport vessel Meridian's Hope had been in transit for 6 days when someone decided assassination was preferable to negotiation, which struck Eli Vargas as both predictable and profoundly disappointing, given the current political climate surrounding human-Kithran relations. He'd been assigned to the technical support team because someone in human diplomatic services had determined that having an engineer who spoke passable Kithran might prove useful during the 3-month mission. And now, he was discovering that technical support, apparently included being present during active threats to visiting royalty while attempting not to visibly panic. The Queen of the Kithran sovereignty stood in the center of the observation deck, with a kind of profound calm that suggested either complete confidence in her abilities or total detachment from normal survival instinct. Eli suspected the former based on what he'd observed during the past week. Queen Maria was tall even by Kithran standards, easily 2 meters, with the characteristic pointed ears that rose in elegant curves and the silver-threaded skin markings that indicated direct royal lineage, extending back approximately 9 generations. Her formal title was something like Sovereign of the Third Spiral, Keeper of Ancient Wisdom, she who speaks for the Kithran people. But the briefing documents had mercifully shortened it to Queen Maria for human diplomatic purposes. The would-be assassin had managed to bypass 3 separate security checkpoints, using credentials that suggested inside assistance from someone within the delegation, which meant trust had been betrayed in ways that would require extensive investigation once the immediate threat was neutralized. Right now, the immediate future seemed uncertain because the assassin had acquired a plasma cutter, a tool designed for industrial applications rather than personnel elimination, but perfectly capable of causing fatal injury if applied with sufficient determination. "Your reign ends here," the assassin announced with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested extensive rehearsal of this moment. "The sovereignty will not bow to diplomatic compromise with humans. We were meant to stand alone, not dilute our culture through alliance with inferior species." Queen Maria regarded him with the expression of someone evaluating a minor calculation error in otherwise sound mathematics. "Your technique demonstrates adequate training, but your tactical positioning is severely flawed. You've blocked your primary avenue of retreat with cargo containers, and your weapon requires a 3-second charge cycle that I can exploit with minimal effort." The assassin looked briefly confused by receiving tactical criticism from his intended victim, then triggered the plasma cutter's activation sequence. Maria moved with fluid precision that Eli's brain struggled to process at normal speed. She was simply in a different physical location than she'd occupied a moment earlier, the plasma discharge cutting through empty air where she'd been standing half a second before. Her hand moved in a striking pattern Eli recognized from Kithran martial disciplines he'd seen demonstrated in training videos but never witnessed in practical application. And the assassin was on the floor unconscious before the plasma cutter had completed its discharge cycle. The entire sequence occupied perhaps 4 seconds of real time. Maria stood over the unconscious would-be assassin, her breathing completely steady and controlled, showing no signs of elevated stress response. She signaled to her bodyguard Castellan Vorth, who'd been positioned near the entrance maintaining vigilant observation. "Secure this individual and initiate Security Protocol 7. I require identification of whoever provided the access credentials within the hour." Castellan Vorth was an imposing figure who'd been introduced during initial diplomatic protocols as the Queen's Shield, a formal position that apparently combined personal protection, security coordination, and some kind of ancient ceremonial role Eli hadn't fully understood from the briefing materials. Vorth moved to secure the threat with practiced efficiency, his movements suggesting controlled violence held in check by rigid discipline. The observation deck fell into heavy silence, the particular quality of quiet that followed sudden violence and narrowly avoided catastrophe. The other members of the diplomatic delegation, a mix of human and Kithran personnel who'd been observing the star field through the massive viewport, stood frozen in various states of shock and delayed processing. Eli remained near his technical support station, where he'd been monitoring environmental systems and power distribution, his heart rate still catching up to the fact that he'd just witnessed someone attempt to murder the visiting head of state. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline working through his system without productive outlet since he'd been utterly useless during the actual crisis. The Queen looked completely composed, like disarming armed assassins was routine maintenance barely worth noting in her schedule. "You're incredible," he said, the words escaping before his brain had properly evaluated them for diplomatic appropriateness or cultural sensitivity. It was the kind of spontaneous observation that emerged after watching someone handle a life-threatening situation with impossible competence. Genuine appreciation delivered without conscious consideration of context or protocol. The silence that followed his comment was profound and carried a quality that made Eli's nervous system register that something had shifted in ways he didn't understand. Castellan Vorth, who'd been efficiently restraining the unconscious assassin with some kind of binding field, went completely still. Then he started laughing, a deep sound that carried genuine amusement mixed with something else Eli couldn't identify, but that felt significant. "Well spoken, husband of the Queen," Vorth said, his voice carrying across the observation deck with ceremonial formality that seemed completely at odds with his laughter. "Your praise honors her combat skill most appropriately." Eli's brain performed several rapid calculations simultaneously, all of them arriving at the disturbing conclusion that something had gone catastrophically wrong with his attempt at casual compliment. "I'm sorry, I think I misheard you. What did you just call me?" Queen Maria turned to look at him, with an expression that suggested she was fundamentally reassessing something about their interaction or possibly about reality itself. Her eyes, slightly larger than human eyes with vertical pupils, capable of parsing significantly more visual information than his could, focused on him with intensity that made him acutely aware he'd apparently said something far more meaningful than intended. "Castellan Vorth," she said with careful precision, "you have formally identified this human as my bonded husband. Please explain the reasoning that led to this recognition." He praised your combat skill without employing formal honorifics immediately following battle engagement. According to ancient custom, only a bonded partner may do so. The words were spoken without fear, without political calculation, without performance of appropriate deference. I sensed complete sincerity in the recognition. Vorth's tone carried absolute certainty. The criteria established by the ancients are satisfied. He is recognized as your husband according to traditional law. Eli raised his hand in a gesture somewhere between asking permission to speak and signaling desperate confusion. Realized how absurd that probably looked. Continued anyway because the alternative was remaining silent, while apparently being declared married to alien royalty through spectacular cultural misunderstanding. "I'm going to need someone to explain what just happened in small words, because I thought I was making a casual observation about impressive combat skills, not proposing marriage." "Human customs clearly differ substantially from ours," Maria said, her voice carrying the careful control of someone processing profoundly unexpected developments while maintaining diplomatic composure. "However, Castellan Vorth is bound by ancient oaths to truth-sensing abilities that allow him to detect sincerity and genuine recognition. If he has identified you as my bonded husband, that ritual recognition carries legal validity regardless of your conscious intent. That seems like a potentially problematic loophole in your marriage customs." "It's not a loophole. It's the fundamental operating principle. That sincere recognition of partnership transcends formal ceremony. that genuine connection can be identified and validated even when the participants don't. Eli looked around the observation deck, noting that every member of the diplomatic delegation was now watching this unexpected development, with expressions ranging from profound shock to carefully controlled neutrality. The human diplomatic liaison, a perpetually anxious woman named Dr. Chen, who'd been managing protocol complications since departure, looked like she was frantically attempting to calculate the political implications of this situation and arriving at answers she profoundly disliked. "Your Majesty," Chen said with extreme diplomatic care, "perhaps we could discuss this matter privately. Cultural misunderstandings can often be resolved through proper explanation and appropriate contextual." "There is no misunderstanding to resolve," Vorth interrupted with the kind of absolute certainty that suggested he considered the matter settled beyond debate. The human spoke truth from sincere recognition, without performance or calculation obscuring genuine feeling. I sensed no deception, no political maneuvering, no performance of sentiment he believed appropriate. He observed the Queen's exceptional skill and acknowledged it precisely as a bonded partner would, directly, honestly, without ceremony or hierarchy creating distance between genuine recognition and expression. But Maria continued studying Eli's face like she was attempting to read text written in microscopic script across his features. "Do you understand what this means? Castellan Vorth's recognition carries substantial legal weight in Kithran society. You have been formally identified as my bonded partner, according to our most ancient customs and established precedents. I'm starting to grasp that I've somehow accidentally proposed marriage through complete cultural ignorance. Yes." Eli ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture he couldn't suppress despite knowing it probably looked unprofessional. "Is there some kind of process to reverse this? Some way to explain that it was entirely unintentional and based on fundamental misunderstanding of cultural protocols? But the intent was sincere recognition of partnership qualities, even if you didn't consciously understand the cultural framework you were operating within." Vorth's voice carried something that might have been approval mixed with satisfaction. "Ancient law values the underlying truth of connection over the performance of ceremony. You demonstrated that truth through spontaneous, honest recognition. The identification stands according to traditional precedent." Maria gestured toward the exit. "We should relocate this discussion to more private setting. Castellan Vorth, please ensure the security situation is fully resolved and provide me with complete analysis within 2 hours. Dr. Chen, please coordinate with Human Diplomatic Command to explain the situation and request guidance on appropriate protocols for managing this development." They relocated to a secure conference room, while security teams swept the vessel for additional threats and began investigating how the assassin had obtained the necessary credentials and access. Eli sat at the conference table feeling distinctly like he'd accidentally triggered some kind of major diplomatic incident through the profoundly simple act of complimenting someone's combat effectiveness, which seemed like unreasonably severe consequences for honest observation. Maria sat across from him, her posture maintaining formal composure while her eyes suggested she was working through extremely complex calculations regarding implications and possibilities. Castellan Vorth stood near the entrance in the protective position Eli had learned indicated he was maintaining vigilant security awareness. Chen was frantically communicating with someone off-screen, probably human diplomatic headquarters, attempting to determine appropriate response protocols for unprecedented situations. "Explain the custom in detail," Eli said, directing the question toward Maria because she seemed like the most reliable information source. "How does spontaneous compliment translate to marriage recognition in Kithran culture? What's the actual mechanism here? It doesn't translate that way under normal circumstances. But you didn't offer a simple compliment. You offered recognition of fundamental equality." Maria's voice carried the pedagogical tone of someone explaining foundational concepts. In Kithran society, the queen must be addressed using specific honorifics that maintain hierarchical distance. Your Majesty, Sovereign Maria, honored queen of the Kithran people. These formal address patterns create deliberate separation between the queen's position and all other individuals. Right, I understand that much. Most cultures maintain formal address protocols for leadership positions. The only person explicitly exempt from these requirements is a bonded partner, someone whose connection to the queen transcends hierarchy, because it's fundamentally based on genuine equality and mutual recognition rather than political structure. She leaned forward slightly, her focus intense. When you praised my combat skill by simply saying, "You're incredible," you employed the direct personal form without any honorifics whatsoever. You spoke to me as a complete equal, without apparent fear of consequences or calculation of appropriate protocol, because I was making an honest observation, not navigating complex diplomatic frameworks. Precisely, and that's exactly what identifies you as potential bonded partner. The natural ability to see me as an individual person rather than as a political position, to respond with sincere recognition rather than performed deference to rank. Maria glanced toward Vorth. The Castellan is bound by ancient oaths to truth-sensing capabilities. He can detect with extreme accuracy when someone speaks from genuine feeling versus when they're performing politically calculated sentiment. His identification of you as my husband means he sensed that your words originated from completely sincere recognition, without any performative element. I absolutely spoke sincerely. I genuinely think your combat skills are remarkably impressive. That doesn't mean I consciously intended to propose marriage. Conscious intent toward marriage isn't the relevant criterion. Intent toward sincere recognition is what matters. Vorth's voice carried the certainty of someone explaining fundamental natural law. You intended genuine acknowledgement of the Queen's exceptional capabilities. That intent satisfies the ancient criteria, regardless of whether you understood the specific cultural implications your expression would carry. Chen had finished her urgent communication, and now addressed the room with extremely careful diplomatic language. We need to seriously consider the substantial political ramifications. If Kithran society recognizes this identification as legally valid, there will be significant consequences for the current negotiation frameworks and established diplomatic protocols. The consequences are already manifesting and will continue to develop, Maria said with calm certainty. News of Castellan Vorth's formal recognition will spread through my delegation within the next few hours. By tomorrow, the entire sovereignty will be aware that a human has been identified as my bonded partner, according to our most ancient and respected customs. Can you simply declare the identification invalid? Explain that substantial cultural differences created fundamental misunderstanding that invalidates the recognition. I could attempt that approach. However, doing so would require me to directly contradict Castellan Vorth's truth-sensing assessment, which would significantly undermine the foundational principle that genuine sincerity can be accurately recognized and formally validated. That principle is absolutely critical to our entire legal structure and social organization. Maria's expression remained diplomatically neutral, but something in her voice suggested she was actively considering various possibilities. Alternatively, we could formally acknowledge the recognition and explore what it actually means in practical terms. Eli felt like the conversation was accelerating faster than his cognitive processing could comfortably handle. Are you actually suggesting we proceed as though I'm legitimately your husband based on one completely accidental compliment delivered in cultural ignorance? I'm suggesting we acknowledge that your accidental compliment revealed something potentially significant, that humans may interact with authority structures fundamentally differently than other species we've encountered in diplomatic contexts. That your cultural framework apparently allows for genuine equality even with formal, extremely authentic. I'm genuinely confused and genuinely concerned about having somehow accidentally married alien royalty through spectacular cultural misunderstanding and complete protocol ignorance. That sincerity is precisely what Castellan Vorth recognized and formally validated. Most people who approach me in any context are performing something: calculated deference, strategic political maneuvering, carefully rehearsed courtesy designed to achieve specific objectives. You're simply reacting with complete honesty to an unexpected and confusing situation. Something that might have been appreciation or approval crossed her features. It's remarkably refreshing, actually. Vorth spoke from his protective position near the entrance. The ancient texts describe ideal bonded partnership as two souls recognizing each other without the obscurement of ceremony or hierarchy creating artificial distance. Your Majesty, this human satisfies that description with remarkable precision. He sees you with sufficient clarity to praise your combat skill, without even considering whether such praise requires permission or formal protocol. That clarity of genuine recognition is exactly what the ancients most valued. So what actually happens now? Eli looked between Maria and Vorth, attempting to understand practical implications rather than just abstract principles. Do we have to perform elaborate ceremonies? Make formal public announcements? I should probably mention I don't have any actual knowledge about being married to anyone, much less alien royalty with complex cultural protocols. Catherine bonded partnerships don't traditionally require elaborate ceremonies. The mutual recognition itself constitutes the fundamental bond. What we do require is public acknowledgement and ongoing demonstration that the partnership is genuinely based on sincere connection, rather than political convenience or strategic calculation. Maria considered him with that same analytical focus. You would need to remain with the diplomatic delegation for the complete duration of our mission. Allow the sovereignty to observe our natural interactions. Demonstrate through behavior that Castellan Vorth's recognition accurately identified genuine potential for partnership. Demonstrate it specifically how? By continuing to be authentically yourself. By treating me as an individual person rather than performing what you believe is appropriate deference to my position. By demonstrating that human cultural honesty can create the kind of genuine equality our most ancient customs explicitly value. She smiled slightly, the expression softening her formal composure. If you can manage that consistently, you'll satisfy the traditional requirements far more thoroughly than many formal bonded partnerships successfully achieve. Chen looked like she desperately wanted to object, but couldn't locate diplomatically appropriate language for expressing, "This entire situation is completely insane." She settled for addressing purely practical concerns instead. This development will require extensive coordination with human diplomatic command structures. The political implications of a human being formally recognized as the Queen's bonded partner are extremely significant for ongoing negotiations. The implications are also potentially substantially beneficial to diplomatic objectives, Maria countered smoothly. This situation demonstrates that humans can satisfy our most ancient and culturally important requirements through simple, authentic honesty. That our species may possess far greater inherent compatibility than formal diplomatic analysis had previously suggested. That genuine partnership can transcend the careful strategic negotiations we've been conducting through official channels. Eli processed this perspective, mentally running through various scenarios and arriving at mostly concerning possibilities. What happens if I'm completely terrible at this? What if I keep accidentally violating important protocols or saying culturally inappropriate things? Then you'll effectively demonstrate that our ancient customs can successfully accommodate human honesty, even when it manifests awkwardly or creates unexpected complications. That fundamental sincerity matters more than perfect protocol compliance in establishing genuine partnership. Maria's voice carried something that sounded like amusement. Besides, you've already survived accidentally proposing marriage through casual compliment delivered in complete cultural ignorance. How much worse could additional cultural misunderstandings possibly become? I feel like you're dramatically underestimating my substantial capacity for generating awkward mistakes and uncomfortable situations. Perhaps I am, but I'm definitely not underestimating your fundamental sincerity, which is the quality that actually matters according to our most ancient laws and established customs. The news spread through the Kithran delegation with remarkable speed, suggesting their internal communication networks operated with significantly greater efficiency than Eli had previously realized. Within 3 hours of Castellan Vorth's formal recognition, every member of the Queen's extensive retinue was aware that a human technician had been identified as her bonded partner, and their reactions ranged from carefully controlled neutral acceptance to poorly concealed skepticism about the situation's validity. Eli attended what was diplomatically labeled a cultural orientation session, but felt substantially more like an interrogation conducted with elaborate courtesy and formal politeness. 3 senior members of Maria's advisory council sat across from him in a conference room that had been reconfigured to match Kithran aesthetic preferences, all flowing organic curves and bioluminescent accent lighting that suggested natural growth patterns rather than manufactured construction. Technician Vargas, began the eldest council member, whose formal name translated to something approximating keeper of traditional wisdom and ancient custom, but who told Eli to simply call him Sareth. Please help us understand the specific circumstances of your recognition. What precisely prompted your decision to praise the Queen's combat skills in that particular manner? She disarmed an armed assassin in approximately 4 seconds using exceptional tactical precision and remarkable combat skill. It seemed genuinely noteworthy and worth acknowledging. Eli attempted to keep his tone straightforwardly matter-of-fact rather than defensive. I was honestly impressed by the level of skill demonstrated. The comment was an authentic, spontaneous response to observing truly remarkable competence under extreme pressure. You felt no concern whatsoever about addressing the Queen without employing proper formal honorifics. I didn't consciously know that proper honorifics were specifically required for spontaneous observations about combat performance. In human culture, when someone accomplishes something genuinely impressive, you acknowledge it directly and honestly, especially immediately after they've successfully prevented a violent threat to everyone's safety. Another council member, a younger woman whose role apparently involved security assessment and threat analysis, leaned forward with evident interest. You genuinely didn't consider hierarchical protocol requirements before speaking those words. No, I observed someone handle a dangerous crisis with exceptional skill and said so immediately. The hierarchical implications didn't occur to me at all until Castellan Vorth started laughing and formally calling me the Queen's husband. Sareth exchanged significant glances with the other council members, engaging in some form of silent communication that Eli couldn't successfully parse without better understanding of Kithran nonverbal cues. This apparently casual disregard for established hierarchy. Is this behavioral pattern common among humans generally? I mean, we definitely have hierarchies and formal protocols in various contexts, but we also maintain strong cultural values around directness and authentic honesty that sometimes override formal structural considerations. If someone's performing exceptional work, you acknowledge it directly. If someone's demonstrably wrong about something, you tell them honestly. Performing excessive deference when you don't genuinely feel it registers as dishonest to most human cultural frameworks. Absolutely fascinating. The security assessor made detailed notes on her tablet. So your spontaneous praise of the Queen originated from culture. The council interview continued for another 90 minutes, with the members asking increasingly detailed questions about human cultural values, typical communication patterns, and general approaches to authority structures. Eli answered as honestly as he could manage, becoming increasingly aware that his casual cultural assumptions were being systematically analyzed for compatibility with Kithran ancient customs and traditional requirements. After the council members finally released him from questioning, Eli found Maria in the space that had been designated as her private quarters, an area that managed to be simultaneously elegantly appointed and clearly temporary, like extraordinarily luxurious camping. She was reviewing diplomatic data on a holographic display, her posture relaxed in ways he hadn't observed during any formal diplomatic functions. How did the interrogation proceed? She asked without looking up from her analytical work. I think I passed their evaluation. They seemed genuinely interested in the fact that humans apparently value directness and authentic honesty over rigid hierarchical deference in most social contexts. Eli remained near the entrance, still uncertain about proper protocol for entering the Queen's designated private space. Should I not be here? I'm still actively figuring out what's culturally appropriate in this situation. You've been formally identified as my bonded partner. According to established custom, my private quarters are equally your private quarters. She finally looked up from her work, gesturing toward available seating. Though I genuinely appreciate you asking rather than simply assuming access rights. It demonstrates the kind of natural consideration that makes genuine partnership actually function successfully. Eli sat down, still experiencing the sensation of navigating completely unfamiliar territory without adequate maps or reliable guides. The council members kept emphasizing ancient customs and traditional laws. Is there actually written documentation of these specific requirements, or does it operate more as oral tradition and cultural memory? Both systems exist simultaneously. The core foundational principles are extensively documented in texts that predate our current civilization by several thousand years. But practical interpretation and application has always been handled by truth sensors like Castellan Vorth, whose specialized abilities to detect genuine sincerity allow for application of underlying principles, rather than rigid rule-following that ignores context. Maria set aside her work completely, giving him focused attention. The ancient customs explicitly value the essential spirit of connection over the technical letter of ceremonial requirements. That's precisely why your honest recognition satisfies traditional requirements that many formal bonded partnerships sometimes fail to adequately meet. What actually happens if we can't successfully demonstrate genuine partnership? If the sovereignty eventually decides that Castellan Vorth's assessment was somehow incorrect. Vorth has never been wrong in 30 consecutive years of service in his current role. His truth-sensing capabilities are the absolute foundation of his position as my shield and primary protector. She stated it with complete certainty. But to directly answer your question, if we genuinely cannot demonstrate sincere connection over time, the recognition could potentially be challenged and formally invalidated. That outcome would significantly damage Vorth's professional credibility and substantially undermine the fundamental principle that authentic sincerity can be accurately recognized and properly validated. So there's significant pressure to make this situation work, even though it's fundamentally based on cultural misunderstanding and accidental communication. There's meaningful incentive to genuinely explore whether Vorth's recognition accurately identified something real, authentic potential for genuine partnership that transcends our initial mutual cultural ignorance. Maria studied his face with that increasingly familiar analytical intensity. "You're uncomfortable with the political implications and broader consequences. I'm a technician who primarily monitors environmental systems and power distribution networks. I'm not remotely equipped for successfully navigating complex interstellar political ramifications of accidental marriage to alien royalty." Absolutely, no one is adequately equipped for that specific scenario initially. Any form of partnership requires continuous learning and adaptation. She smiled with genuine warmth. "Though I'll readily acknowledge that most people receive substantially more gradual introduction to partnership concepts than you spontaneously complimented someone, and now you're formally married to alien royalty. That's definitely an unusually condensed relationship origin story. It's also a story that perfectly satisfies our oldest and most valued cultural requirements. Two souls recognizing each other authentically, without ceremony or hierarchy, obscuring the fundamental connection. Whether that initial recognition successfully develops into sustained, genuine partnership, or reveals itself as temporary situational compatibility, that's precisely what we're here to discover together." Eli considered this perspective carefully, attempting to separate his anxiety about unexpected responsibility from genuine curiosity about what had actually occurred. "When you disarmed that assassin earlier, I really was genuinely impressed by what I observed. The immediate tactical assessment, the absolute precision of physical movement, the complete calm maintained under direct threat. It was objectively remarkable to witness. And you expressed that impression immediately and spontaneously, without calculating whether such observation was culturally appropriate or would create significant consequences." Maria's voice carried definite warmth now. That kind of spontaneous, authentic honesty is precisely what Vorth recognized and formally validated. The relevant question now is whether that fundamental honesty can be consistently sustained as we navigate the substantial complexity of our respective positions and ongoing responsibilities. "I'm not naturally skilled at political complexity or diplomatic maneuvering." "No, apparently not. But you're demonstrably very capable of genuine recognition without performative elements. That quality might prove substantially more valuable than sophisticated political skills, at least for satisfying ancient customs that explicitly prioritize sincerity over elaborate ceremony." She returned partial attention to her diplomatic work, a gesture that somehow felt like comfortable inclusion rather than dismissal. "Stay here. Work on whatever technical responsibilities you're managing. Become comfortable with the concept that shared space doesn't require constant formal interaction or performed engagement." Eli accessed his own work tablet, reviewing environmental system logs and power distribution data that suddenly felt remarkably mundane, compared to accidentally becoming the formally recognized bonded partner of alien royalty. But there was something genuinely reassuring about Maria's casual acceptance of his presence, her apparent willingness to simply exist in shared space, without demanding constant formal engagement or performed interaction. The diplomatic mission continued over subsequent weeks with Eli occupying an increasingly bizarre dual role: technical support staff and formally recognized bonded partner to visiting royalty. The human delegation struggled extensively to determine appropriate protocols for managing this unprecedented situation, eventually settling on treating it as a unique cultural learning opportunity that would require extremely careful management and exhaustive documentation. Maria approached their unusual partnership with pragmatic grace that impressed Eli considerably. She neither performed excessive connection nor maintained unnecessarily formal distance. They shared meals when their respective schedules naturally aligned, discussed both technical and political challenges with equal directness, and gradually developed the kind of genuinely comfortable interaction that suggested maybe Castellan Vorth's initial recognition hadn't been entirely wrong about underlying compatibility potential. The mission concluded successfully 3 months later, with finalized agreements establishing comprehensive frameworks for human-Kithran cooperation that were genuinely unprecedented in scope and mutual commitment. Multiple political analysts would later attribute the diplomatic breakthrough partly to trust created by the Queen's recognized partnership with a human, which had demonstrated species compatibility that formal negotiation alone hadn't successfully achieved. Eli and Maria continued their partnership after returning from the mission, navigating the ongoing complexity of interspecies relationship with the same fundamental directness that had initiated their unexpected bond. Consistently honest communication, genuine mutual recognition, and complete inability to maintain rigid formal distance when authentic sincerity felt more appropriate and natural. Castellan Vorth accompanied them in his role as the Queen's shield, his truth-sensing assessment having proven entirely correct about the genuine potential for sustained partnership. He took particular satisfaction in regularly pointing out to various skeptics that ancient customs had succeeded precisely where modern diplomatic approaches had struggled, that recognizing fundamental sincerity mattered substantially more than maintaining elaborate rigid protocols. Sometimes, Eli reflected, the most meaningful connections formed through spectacular honest mistakes rather than through careful deliberate planning. Ancient wisdom had valued sincerity over ceremony for countless generations.